Today we're going to do a camera comparison between a Xiaomi 15 Ultra versus a Xiaomi 14 Ultra. So the first thing I've noticed is the ultra wide, where the Xiaomi 14 Ultra is just a bit wider than the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. Also, the camera sensor is different, where the Xiaomi 14 Ultra has the Sony 858 sensor, and on the new 15 Ultra is Samsung's JN5 sensor. For the main camera, they both have the 1-inch sensor. It should be the same with the Sony LYT900, so it seems like the quality wise should be very similar. Now for the floating telephoto, it's a Sony 858 sensor, and this and all the other ones I mentioned are at 50 megapixels. And for the periscope telephoto camera, this is where the Xiaomi 15 Ultra has the big upgrade. Instead of the 50 megapixel Sony IMX858 camera sensor from the past, the Xiaomi 15 Ultra has a 200 megapixel camera with Samsung's HP9 sensor. Now with all the camera specs that looks pretty identical to each other, especially during daytime, it's really hard to tell which one has the better quality image. Now both of these phones are shot using the Leica authentic color profile, so they should look very similar. The Xiaomi 15 Ultra does have a more contrastier look to the colors. So I feel like if you do have the 14 Ultra, most of the experience will be very similar. It's once you start using the telephoto lens, that's when you notice some differences. For a regular consumer, yeah, they probably won't be able to notice anything, especially when you start using that new periscope telephoto lens. Taking pictures of things far away like buildings and such, you probably won't notice any huge differences, but when you start to zoom in into that lens, you'll most likely see the background blur to be a bit more blurrier. On the wide lens, since they're both 1-inch sensors, they should be very identical to each other, but if you do look at the Verizon logo in the background, it's very slight, but you can tell that it's kind of more blurrier. With this set of pictures, you can't really tell until you zoom in up to 10x is that the building behind the umbrella really shows that the Xiaomi 15 Ultra has the bigger sensor, which may be enough for you to upgrade. But yeah, I really like how even if you zoom into something that's pretty far away, you can still get that slight background blur. I feel like the telephoto lenses on these phones are finally getting the love that they deserve, and the quality is only going to get better from here. Now I know these phones are meant for photographers, so I get it, this is what they want, and they notice these little things. So I think that these camera sensors will soon make their way into these regular consumer phones. It feels like I'm taking a picture from an actual point and shoot camera. So by the time these camera sensors are in the consumer phones, maybe these ultra line cameras will have a 1-inch sensor for the telephoto. So with this new telephoto, I feel like I don't really need to worry about zooming in too much, since I know the quality is going to be very good. So what I'm saying is that the biggest difference you'll notice is when you're zooming in into your photos. Now when you're shooting in low light environments, of course the quality is very similar, but I feel like the biggest difference here is still the colors. Now I'll say that I have gotten the 15 Ultra a month before they released it, and I noticed that when I'm testing it out during nighttime, the periscope telephoto lens can be a little bit hit or miss. Especially when it's very cold and windy out where my hands are shaking and it's trying to stay still for taking that zoomed in shot. There are times when the photo can be pretty blurry, but if you have it very still and it's in focus, the pictures will look very good. I feel like eventually with these phones getting the bigger sensors on pretty much all the camera lenses, people will probably stop using the portrait mode unless they really want the background to be very blurry. And speaking of portrait mode, moving on to that, it looks like the UI on the new 15 Ultra is simplified, where you can customize or change that background blur effect, but you're not assigned to any specific focal length to that background blur effect. And instead of millimeters, you get the regular 1x, 2x, 3x. So I feel like less is going on and it's easy to use this year. So comparing the two, it looks like the blacks on my jacket and my shirt looks a bit brighter on the 15 Ultra throughout these shots. So it's just bright enough where you can tell the difference between the black shirt and the black jacket. Now in my opinion, I really like that they didn't include the master lens system with the 15 Ultra, because I noticed that I barely used it, and if I really wanted to use the swirly bokeh, I feel like I'm really restricted into just using that focal length, and there are times where I want to use it at the 35mm or the 75, so it's nice that I can now just choose the background blur effect into any millimeter I want. Now moving on to video for the ultra wide, the stabilization I feel like it's a bit smoother on the 15 Ultra, and the whole image feels like it's just slightly brighter. Like the shadows are a bit more exposed, but On the highlights, it could be a bit too bright, so maybe they can dial that down a little bit. Now for the main wide lens, it does look like the stabilization looks very identical to each other, but as I mentioned before with the ultra wide, it does seem like the overall image is just slightly brighter on the 15 Ultra. Now moving on to that periscope telephoto lens, yes, you can tell a big difference between the two, especially when you look at the background, which is obviously exposed very well and not overblown like the 14 Ultra. Now for ultra wide using low light, when you walk around the city where there's a bunch of street lights and car lights, it does look like there's less reflection going on, so we don't see that flare on the 15 Ultra as much. And for the main wide camera, the biggest difference I've noticed is the Xiaomi 15 Ultra just seems a bit more brighter in the shadows. And I want to test out the stabilization on the telephoto lenses, which it does seem like the 15 Ultra does a better job. So that is a comparison, and I feel like if you do have the 14 Ultra, you don't really need to upgrade unless you really want that new periscope telephoto lens. So let me know your thoughts, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.